Hello, good evening. Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday, Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. Okay, I got distracted during the 2-minute countdown. So let me do a few machine clicks here to get this displaying as I need it to. How's everybody doing? Feels like the world gets crazier every day. But thank God we have this consistent, steady time together where we can focus on the eternal truths, the eternal knowledge and truth and values of the Torah. Who's in the house? Yehud in South Carolina, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Nancy in North Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Melissa in Great Neck, Shandora in the Bronx, Gail in Kansas City, Guy in Ohio, Belle in Texas, Bella in Florida, Lucy in Minnesota, Sharon in New Jersey, Karen in Northern California, Annette in Fort Lauderdale. That's a new name. Welcome, Annette. And Eileen in the suburbs of New York City. Welcome, Eileen. And Camille, the mitzvah, enjoying the mitzvah of studying with us very much. And we are remembering Eden and Hirsch and Almog and Carmel and Alex and Ori Denino. May the memories always be for a blessing. May the neshamas have an aliyah. We say amen. Also welcoming Bito in Panama, Chaim in Florida, Alan in New York City, James in Indianapolis, Ilanit in Silver Spring, Ella in Southern California, and Jean in Arizona. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Our daf today is page 67 here in Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 2 in chapter 5. Generally speaking, remember the great stringency that the sages imposed on the wine of idolaters because they would pour out some of their wine as a libation to their idolatrous gods and to make a fence around the Torah and make sure we never come to benefit from it because the Torah is so strict and has so many prohibitions explicit in the written Torah against Avoda Zara, against idolatry. And so we distance ourselves from it in every possible way, including the wine of idolaters. And the sages went further. The wine of Gentiles is prohibited to the Jews for consumption or benefit because when they were making these decrees, it was very likely, well, all Gentiles were idolaters, and it was so likely that they poured out some of their wine as a libation to idolatry that all of the wine of Gentiles was rendered prohibited to us. But now we've been studying the nuances of that prohibition. Today we'll look at what about the smell of that wine? If we smell prohibited wine, have we violated the prohibition? Basically, the question is, are you consuming wine when you inhale the aroma of wine? Let's look at this question. We're picking it up near the top of page 66b. With regard to this bunghole. Okay, a bunghole. That word is, often used in a facetious manner, not taking its actual meaning. Right? So, what is a bunghole? A bunghole is a small hole that was made in the cork of a wine barrel. Right? So, a wine barrel held a certain amount of wine. It had a cork in it. They made a hole in the cork, not to pour wine out, but just to smell it, to see how the wine was doing, so to speak. That's what a bunghole was. So with regard to this bunghole, the hole in a barrel through which one can smell the wine, if a Gentile smells a Jew's wine through the bunghole, the wine is permitted. But for a Jew to smell a Gentile's wine through the bunghole, we have a dispute. Abaye says that it is prohibited, whereas Rava says that it is permitted. Abaye says that it is prohibited because he holds that a smell is a substantial matter, a significant form of pleasure, and it is not permitted to derive benefit from a Gentile's wine. Rava says it is permitted because he holds that a smell is nothing, meaning in this context, it is not significant. Now, obviously, smells are very important. It's a very important sense. The sense of smell is a very important sense. We've all been triggered by certain smells that take us right back to another period of our lives. If you walk into a house and somebody's baking fresh bread in it, wow! I mean, that causes a tremendous pleasure and anticipation. Obviously, smell is a substantial matter in the way that it affects humans. But what we're talking about is consumption. Have you really consumed something that is prohibited when you smell it? Let's keep reading. Rava says, from where do I say that a smell is nothing, and therefore, if a Jew smells the wine of a Gentile, he has not violated a prohibition? It is, as we learned in a Mishna, tractate terumos, with regard to an oven, that one lit with cumin stalks of terumah. Right, so this means stalks of cumin that were set aside as terumah, the tithe that is given to a priest, and only a priest can consume it. Then they burned the cumin stalks in order to fire up an oven that they baked bread into it. So the question is, did the smell that was rising from these very aromatic stalks, when they were burned to heat the oven, right, these clay ovens that were heated in this way, and remember, the fire is inside the oven, not under the oven, right? Think about these kind of pizza ovens that you've seen, where the fire is inside the clay oven and the bread is alongside it. So the bread is very much going to absorb, at least an odor of the cumin, because the cumin was burned inside to heat up the oven to bake the bread. Now, a non-Kohen, a non-priest, cannot consume terumah, not because it's cumin, but because it's terumah, because it was set aside only to be consumed by priests. So the question is, now that this cumin terumah was burned to fire up the oven, right, and that smell got into the bread that was baked there, are we going to say that the bread is prohibited to a non-priest because it has absorbed this flavor from the cumin being burned? Rav is obviously going to say, no, it remains permitted because the smell didn't really, it's not food. He's not consuming anything when cumin was burned in order to bake the bread, right? The bread is permitted because it has not absorbed the flavor of the cumin stalks, but only the smell of the cumin stalks. Big difference, according to Rava. And this indicates that smell alone does not render a food forbidden. Okay, so how does Abaye explain that he would prohibit the Jew from smelling the wine of the Gentile? He answers that it is different there. He agrees that Mishna is correct, but it is different there because the forbidden substance, right, the cumin that was terumah, and therefore a non-priest can't eat it, was burned. They didn't mix cumin into the bread, they burned the cumin. The smell of the forbidden cumin stalks entered the bread after the cumin stalks themselves were consumed by the fire. And a smell that is not from a substance that is actually extant is not forbidden. By contrast, in a case where the smell is from an extant source, right, something that continues to exist, is not being burned up, is forbidden, according to Abaye. Rav Mari said the dispute between Abaye and Rava is parallel to a dispute between Tanaim, right? Abaye and Rava are Amoraim, sages of the Gemara or the Talmudic period later in Bavel. Tanaim are sages from an earlier period, the period of the Mishna, and generally living in the land of Israel. So it's parallel to a dispute between Tanaim, as is taught in a Mishnah in Tractate Terumos, With regard to one who detached a hot loaf of bread from the oven, right? Often the dough of the bread, which was more like pita bread or even tortillas, it was a flat bread. And they would take the dough and stick it to the side of the clay oven in order to bake it. That's why they're talking about detaching it. With regard to one who detached a hot loaf of bread from the oven, and he placed it on the opening of a barrel of wine of terumah. Now, the wine is the terumah. The wine is only permitted for consumption by a priest, a non-priest, right? A regular Yisrael, a regular Jew who's not a priest, cannot consume that wine because it was set aside as terumah. So now they take this hot bread and they put it over a container of wine, right? So the wine, fumes are always rising from wine because there's alcohol in it, right? And so this wine fumes are rising into the hot, fresh baked bread. So in that situation, the portion of the produce in that situation where there's a barrel of wine of terumah, Rabbi Meir deems the bread forbidden to non-priests, as in his opinion, the smell of the wine renders the bread forbidden to them, right? Meaning that the smell of the wine, which is terumah, enters the hot bread and therefore renders that bread prohibited to anyone who's not a priest. So Rabbi Meir seems to be agreeing that smell is substantial, and that's why he prohibits it. It prohibits that bread. And Rabbi Yehuda takes the other side of the argument and deems the bread permitted. Rabbi Yosei deems it permitted in a case of wheat bread, but forbidden in a case of barley bread, because the barley bread draws out the fumes of the wine, I guess absorbs more than the wheat bread does. Rav Mari explains, and what? Is it not with regard to this matter that the sages in the Mishnah disagree, that one sage, Rabbi Meir, holds that a smell is a substantial matter, and the other sage, Rabbi Yehuda, holds that smell is nothing. So Meir agrees with Abaye, or Abaye agrees with Rabbi Meir, and Rava agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the Gemara remarks, according to the opinion of Rava, the dispute between him and Abaye is certainly parallel to a dispute between Tanaim, as he must concede that Rabbi Meir holds that a smell is a substantial matter. But according to the opinion of Abaye, shall we say that it is parallel to a dispute between Tanaim? And the Gemara answers, well, Abaye could say to you that Rabbi Yehuda also holds that a smell is a substantial matter. Wasn't it stated with regard to the Mishnah that Rabbah Bar Chana says, that Reish Lakish says, in the case of a hot loaf of bread, and an open barrel, everyone agrees that it is forbidden, as the bread certainly absorbed the smell of the wine. And furthermore, in the case of a cool loaf of bread and a stoppered barrel, everyone agrees that it is permitted. They disagree only with regard to the case of a hot loaf of bread and a stoppered barrel, or in the case of a cool loaf of bread and an open barrel. In this case of mine, i.e. the case of the bunghole in the barrel of wine, is also comparable to the case of a hot loaf of bread and an open barrel, in which everyone agrees that the bread is forbidden, right? So that's Abaye's point of view. Now, it is stated, and that's where they're going to leave it off, but generally speaking, let's just see where the law ended up on this. Okay, forbidden meat may not be roasted with permitted meat in the same oven, ab initio. But after the fact, the permitted meat remains permitted, because the law is in accordance with the opinion of Levi that a smell is not considered substantial, as the Rif notes. So it seems like we hold like Rava in most cases, but let's keep reading. It is stated in the Mishnah, this is the principle, anything that benefits from a forbidden item imparting flavor to it. I read this somewhere else. Yeah, let me just read also what it said about the bunghole. A Gentile smelling a Jew's wine does not render the wine forbidden, and it is permitted to inhale the bouquet of wine used for a libation with one's mouth through a puncture in the barrel in order to judge its quality, because the intent is not to derive benefit from the bouquet of the wine. Right? So we agree with Rava that if the Jew smells the wine of a Gentile, even though it was used for a libation, he has not it is not a prohibited act, right? Because he's not inhaling that wine to go, What a pleasurable smell that is. But if he was doing that, then he would be deriving benefit and it would be prohibited. And where do we see that? Sometimes in the ancient world, they would sprinkle wine as a perfume, right? Or as a room deodorizer. So if you were sprinkling wine in order to derive pleasure, to hide foul odors or to enhance the scent of the room, then it would be prohibited because we cannot derive benefit from the wine of the Gentiles. Okay, back to 67a. It is stated in our Mishnah 2 here in chapter 5. This is the principle. Anything that benefits from a forbidden item imparting flavor to it, not scent, but flavor, i.e. the forbidden item contributes a positive taste to the mixture is forbidden. And anything that does not benefit from a forbidden item imparting flavor to it is permitted. So for example, forbidden vinegar that fell onto split beans, as the flavor imparted by the vinegar does not enhance the taste of the beans, and that's why the beans would remain permitted. If the forbidden substance, like vinegar made from the wine of Gentiles, imparted it made a positive contribution to the flavor of the beans, then the beans would be prohibited because they benefited from the prohibited substance, in this case wine made from the vinegar made from the wine of the Gentiles. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says this is the law. And Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says the sages taught this only with regard to a case where the vinegar fell onto hot split beans, imparting flavor to their detriment, right? Vinegar and hot split beans will make the beans taste worse. But if the vinegar fell onto cold split beans, then the vinegar would enhance the flavor. And if one subsequently heated them, it becomes like a dish that some added ingredient first enhanced its flavor and ultimately detracted from it. And this is rendered forbidden as the initial flavor that was imparted was beneficial, right? So if it benefits in any way, even if ultimately it doesn't, if it benefited at any stage, sounds like it'll be prohibited mixture. And similarly, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he reported that Rabba Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says the sages taught this only with regard to the case where the vinegar fell onto hot split beans, that it would be permitted. But if the vinegar fell onto cold split beans and one subsequently heated the mixture, it becomes like a dish that some added ingredient first enhanced the flavor and ultimately detracted from it, and it is rendered forbidden. Same ruling, but from a different source. And similarly, when Rav Dimi came, he also reported this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan and added, and they would prepare this dish of split beans and vinegar on the eves of Shabbos in Sippori, and they would call it cress dish, right? You can add vinegar to hot split beans, you just can't add vinegar that was made from the wine of Gentiles. New subject, Reish Lakish says, with regard to the principle that the sages said that if a forbidden food imparts flavor to a permitted food, to the detriment of the mixture remains permitted. About this, the criterion is not that people would say the dish is lacking in salt or is overabundant in salt, is lacking in spices or is overabundant in spices, and that is why the flavor was detracted by the forbidden food. Rather, it is referring to any dish that is not lacking in anything, but will not be eaten only because of this forbidden substance that fell into it. And there are those who say that Reish Lakish states a lenient interpretation of the principle with regard to that which the sages said that it is forbidden, that if a forbidden food imparts flavor to the permitted food to the detriment of the mixture remains permitted. One does not say that a certain food is forbidden because its flavor was not actually detracted by the forbidden substance, as this dish is lacking salt or is overabundant in salt, is lacking in spices or is overabundant in spices, and it is for that reason that the forbidden substance detracted from its flavor. Rather, since now in any event the forbidden substance detracted from its flavor, it is permitted, right? So that was tough to understand. What? Are we saying that it only adds or that it only detracts from the flavor a little bit, and then we're not going to render it permitted? But if it detracts a lot, it is going to be permitted. Is that what they're saying? That's not really what they're saying. So let me just read how it's worded here by the editors of the Koran. Okay. Even if the forbidden substance is to the detriment of the mixture, only due to the presence of a third substance. For example, if a forbidden substance spilled into a pot containing salt or a spice, without which the forbidden substance would not impart a detrimental flavor, nevertheless, since the flavor it imparts is detrimental, the mixture is permitted. Right, so very interesting that, in other words, there's chemistry, right? There's food chemistry. So if, you have this pot of food and it didn't contain, I'm just making this up, cumin, right? If it didn't contain cumin and the forbidden, substance fell into it because it was terumah or because it was not, it was, it had been used, it belonged to gentile, something makes it prohibited. And it falls in, right? And then it does it, and then in the absence of cumin, it would not be noticeable because it would just be such a small amount and it would have no effect, right? So it would not be detrimental. Since it's not detrimental, it would be prohibited, right? Because it fell in. Now that there is cumin in the dish, the forbidden substance interacts with the cumin, and that's what makes it detrimental, right? So it's only because the cumin is there that this forbidden substance adds a detrimental taste. So you might have thought, well, since, it's only because the cumin is there that it's detrimental. If the cumin wasn't there, it wouldn't be detrimental. Therefore, we should keep the mixture prohibited. The Mishna comes to tell you, no, the fact is, it is detrimental to this particular dish, whatever the reason is, in this case, because there's cumin in it. So the fact, since it is detrimental, the dish is going to remain permitted. And the editors add, by Torah law, in a case where a forbidden substance was mixed with a permitted substance, if they were of the same type, such that the flavor of the forbidden substance cannot be discerned, then the mixture is permitted, provided that the permitted substance constitutes the majority of the mixture. In a case where the two substances were of different types, for example, forbidden fat that fell into split beans and was dissolved in the dish, if the flavor of the fat cannot be discerned, the mixture is permitted. If the flavor can be discerned, then the forbidden fat has been dissolved. It is prohibited by rabbinic law. If the forbidden fat has not been dissolved, the mixture is prohibited by Torah law. When is the forbidden substance considered undissolved? For example, if an olive bulk of forbidden fat was mixed in with 3 egg bulks, and on and on and on it goes. We're not going to get into every nuance of this. That was kind of not what we're studying right now. It was just added information. But again, not simple stuff. So since it's so complicated and we just won't be sure what to do unless we really are experts in the law, if it happens, call your rabbi and take strong measures to avoid having prohibited substances in your kitchen that might become mixed with something permitted. Okay. Furthermore, with regard to a forbidden food that became mixed furthermore, with regard to a forbidden food that became mixed with a permitted food, Rabbi Abahu says that Rabbi Yochanan says, in any case where the flavor and substance of the forbidden food are perceptible in the mixture is forbidden, and one is flogged for consuming it. And it is a tradition that this is the measure, right, the minimum measure to trigger that liability. One who eats an olive bulk of the forbidden element in the mixture in the time it takes to eat a half loaf of bread is liable for eating the forbidden food. Now we're on 67b. But if only the flavor of the forbidden food is recognizable in the mixture, but not its substance, as it was completely dissolved in the permitted food, the mixture is forbidden, but one is not flogged for consuming it. And if the forbidden food amplified the flavor of the permitted food to its detriment, that's what we've been learning today, then the mixture would be permitted because the forbidden food only detracted from the flavor of the mixture. And the Gemara asks, but then let Rabbi Yochanan say if the forbidden food imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted. Why does he use the term amplified? And the Gemara answers that this is what Rabbi Yochanan teaches us, that even if there are other substances that detracted from the flavor of the mixture along with the forbidden food, for example, insufficient salt or excessive seasoning, this is not taken into consideration. Since the forbidden food detracted from its flavor, the mixture is permitted. And the Gemara comments, and the law is in accordance with the last version of the statement of Reish Lakish. New subject. Rav Kahana says, from the statements of all the Amoraim who were cited, namely Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, we learn that if a forbidden food imparts flavor to a permitted food to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted. Abaye said to him, granted, from all the rest of them, this conclusion is very well. But how can this be concluded from the statement of Reish Lakish? He says only that the sages said that if a forbidden food imparts flavor to a permitted food to its detriment, the mixture is permitted. Perhaps he's only citing what others said, and he himself does not hold accordingly. And the Gemara asks with regard to Rav Kahana's statement by inference, is there one who says that if a forbidden food imparts flavor to a permitted food to the detriment of the mixture, that it is forbidden? And the Gemara answers, yes. And this opinion is taught in a baraisa, both in the case where the forbidden food imparts flavor to the detriment of the flavor of the permitted food, and in a case where it imparts flavor that enhances the permitted food. In both cases, the mixture is forbidden. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shimon says, if it enhances, the flavor is forbidden, but if it causes detriment, it is permitted. And the Gemara explains, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Meir? That even if it causes detriment to the mixture, it's still going to render the mixture prohibited. He derives this law from the case of the vessels of Gentiles that require purging, i.e. vessels that Gentiles use for cooking, which the Torah requires that one purge through fire and ritually purify before they may be used by Jews. Right? That's a law that we see in the Torah. You can acquire a metal pot, that was not fabricated by Jews, that was owned by Gentiles, and you can bring it into our kitchen, but you have to purge it either with fire, which is what they're talking about here, or with water. Right? With water, you can toivel it. Does it have to be boiling water in order to kosher it? That's a different question. And the idea that we can toivel and go through water, whether it's boiling or not, is actually, that's rabbinic. But we did learn in the Torah that when they brought in, booty that was captured in one of those wars of conquest, that they were able to pass them through the fire and keep the booty. Right? So vessels that Gentiles use for cooking, we must purge them with fire before they may be used by Jews. That's Numbers 31, verses 22 and 23. Now, is it not the case that vessels of Gentiles that require purging impart flavor to food that is cooked in them to their detriment? Since time has passed, since the Gentiles cooked non-kosher food in the vessels, the flavor that the vessels transmit to the food that a Jew cooks in them is certainly detrimental, and yet the merciful one deems their use prohibited without purging. And so too, the case here is no different, and even if the flavor imparted by the forbidden food is detrimental one, the mixture should be forbidden. We also see this, by the way, and again, you need to check with your rabbi. I'm not a rabbi. But there's a situation where, you're in an Airbnb, there's a barbecue there, right? Can you bring your kosher meat and cook it on it, though you don't know who's used that grill before? Yes, if you first, turn that flame up really high and heat up that grill, I think minimum 10 minutes at very high heat, so that any food that would have been on that grill is gone, right? It's gone. It's like been totally consumed by the fire. That's this same law. But you should do your own research and talk with your rabbi, right? And the opinion of the other Tana, Rabbi Shimon, who deems the mixture permitted if the flavor imparted is detrimental, can be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Chia. As Rav Huna, the son of Rav Chia, says, with regard to the vessels of Gentiles, the Torah prohibits only a pot that was used for cooking on that very day, which is not yet impart flavor to the detriment of the food cooked in it. Rather, the flavor that imparts is not considered detrimental. And the opinion of the other Tana, Rabbi Meir, can also be explained in accordance with this statement. As in his opinion, even in the case of a pot that was used for cooking on that very day, it is not possible that it does not detract from the flavor of the food that is subsequently cooked in it, even slightly. And the Gemara asks, and what is the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? It is, as it is taught in Baraisa from the verse, you shall not eat any nevela, right? So that would be a kosher animal that's not slaughtered in a kosher manner. You shall not eat of any nevela. You may give it to the resident alien who is within your gates, that he may eat of it. And it is derived that with regard to animal carcasses, nevela, anything that is fit for a ger toshav to consume, is called a nevela and is forbidden for a Jew, and any carcass that is unfit even for a ger toshav to consume, for example, one that turned rancid and is unfit for consumption, is not called a nevela with regard to its prohibition. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. We're at the top of 68a. And what can Rabbi Meir respond to this? Well, he could say that verse is written to exclude meat that was rancid at the outset, i.e. that was not fit for consumption even before the animal's death due to a defect in the animal. By contrast, a carcass that was fit for consumption when the animal died and was subsequently rendered forbidden because it wasn't slaughtered in a kosher manner, remains forbidden even when it becomes rancid. And Rabbi Shimon could counter that meat that was rancid at the outset does not need specific exclusion by the verse, as it is considered as mere dust, and it does not even fall under the category of nevela, which triggers a different prohibition. That's what I've got for us today. A couple of comments here. Ilanit says, the topic of scents being allowed or not reminds me of the temple incense, which was not to be created for personal use nor enjoyed as pleasurable when visiting the temple. Well, definitely you could not, and it's under penalty of death, that you could not compound the ketoris, right, the incense that was burned in the holy temple, for personal use. And I understand that one of the miracles, at least of the first temple, was that there was always this column of smoke rising from the ketoris on the altar, even when the wind was blowing, and but that it had an incredibly beautiful scent. So you would smell it when you entered the holy temple, and that was one of the beauties of the temple. But I guess what you're saying is you can't go there and go, I want to take that in, because I imagine that would be hekdesh, right? That would be taking personal benefit from something that belongs to the most holy, right? Belongs to the Holy One above, because it has been consecrated and sanctified for that purpose. You can't benefit from it for personal pleasure. But I think, the fact that you inhaled it while you're in the holy temple and it was pleasurable, I don't think means you've triggered that violation. I guess I need to learn more about that. I think, but the idea is that you can't, right? You can't take it for yourself, so to speak, since it's consecrated. Ilanit also says, also flowers are to be smelled only after saying a blessing. We are cautioned to enjoy within boundaries and protocol. Very good. And there is a blessing for enjoying, for example, fragrant herbage, right? So that's Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei izvei v'sami. That's a bracha that you say before you smell. And also at Havdalah, right, where we say borei minei v'sami. Right, the different, those are two different brachas, but also on smell, right? So obviously we're saying a bracha on something because we're enjoying it. You'd have to say that smell has substance. But when we're talking about the law of consuming prohibited foods, that's where we say that, well, there's a disagreement, but one view is that smell doesn't have substance in that context. Bill says, in a related question, what are the rules on cast iron implements? Because, of course, the fats and oils used to season the cast iron generally remain in the cast iron, sealing the natural pores in the metal. Wonderful question, and I don't know the answer. I think that just like a grill can be a cast iron grill, and so, if you pass enough fire over it, the fact that something remains in that grill, despite that high heat and direct flame that was on it, is not going to render that grill prohibited, right? Like you can kosher a kitchen. So by definition, there was prohibited foods in that kitchen before, or at least the possibility of it. And then, a rabbi comes over with like literally a blowtorch, and he koshers your oven grills, and now it's permitted. Is that only because it was stainless steel? Or is it that when we have fire that's that hot, even though something remains in that cast iron, we say it's nullified because the fire, whatever substance it had, even though some of it remains, it's been burned in such a way that we would say it's a different substance now and a permitted one. And Bell says, my father always brought his acetylene torch when he went camping, and he used it on all the grills. Exactly what we're talking about here. Awesome. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Thursday, at the regular Thursday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.